I've often been asked in the comments on my videos, what are the best 4K discs? Well, I don't have all of them, but I do have quite a few, so today I thought I'd detail and go through some of the discs that I think are in the top 10, and I've tried to list them from number 10 all the way to number 1. As some of you will know, that we moved house recently, and as a result we've got a somewhat bigger screen in which to view our films. I don't like watching films on a television, haven't done that for years, and so have video projected really I think for the last 16 years, since video projection became good enough to stand up to Super 8, 16 and 35mm in the home. Now, one of the discs that I've considered to be excellent during the time I've been doing the reviews is Apocalypse Now. There's two versions of this available. This is the 3-disc final cut, but there's also a 6-disc special edition with the original version of the film and Redux on it. And as I record this, HMV are about to get new stocks of that in about a week's time, and it really is worth having. Now, as I detailed in my review of Apocalypse Now, it was transferred from the interpositive because the original negative was completely broken up to make Redux, and by broken up that means they removed every splice carefully so they didn't scratch or damage the film. So to put out the original version of the film, they had to go back to the next element, which is a positive, because you always go from negative, positive, negative, and this is how films are always produced. The original camera negative may have been used for premiere release prints and certainly for 70mm blow-up prints, but that was all it was used for, to protect it. And to protect it, it then went to an interpositive. So as I said, from a negative to a positive. That positive was then used to work out all the grading and the colour. And from that positive, an internegative was created with all the grading incorporated. That internegative was then used to strike all the general release prints. And that's largely what we saw at our local cinemas, unless you were in a big city like New York, Los Angeles, Sydney, London for sure, and you got to the premiere release cinema and you saw that premiere print. So that is why the interpositive was used on this occasion for the transfer of Apocalypse Now, and watching bits and pieces of it again last night to judge it for this video today, it was obvious that on the bigger screen and sitting closer to it, there was more film grain evident than was evident on our previous smaller screen and sitting further away. It's still an excellent transfer, but that increased film grain probably is due to the fact that they had to use the interpositive. It is very fine grain, but it is more evident, so something to bear in mind. The colour, however, exactly as I remembered it when I saw it as a youngster twice, and that's why I remember it so well. I couldn't believe what I'd seen, had to go and see it a second time to confirm that it really did look as good as it did. And so that's how I know this really does match, well, it's probably exceeding the general release print that I saw all the way back in 1979. Another one that I thought I'd mention, because I really do think this one is in the top 10, I just can't quantify exactly where to put it and how good it is. But you look on IMDb and this does say it was shot on video. I've said as a result of that, this has got to be the best quality video I've seen, and it does prove that it can be done. Another one that's exceptional quality is 1917, but there's something just too perfect about that, and it looks too harsh to me somehow. So although I think it's, well, what others call reference quality when it comes to 4K, it just doesn't have that filmic look, and I do prefer the filmic look. But this one, I don't know how they've done it, but if it was shot on video, it's got film grain in it, and that's more evident here on our bigger screen. But this, I think, is one of the best 4Ks I've seen. And that brings me on to one that quite a few of us are really impressed with, the 4K transfer of Jaws, which was actually done many years ago, I think about 11 to 12 years ago when they did the Blu-ray re-release. That transfer at 4K is what we now have on the 4K disc, and it's the HDR, as it usually is, that really makes a difference on our tiny home screens. As I keep saying, if we had 25-30 foot screens in the home, we'd probably more easily see the increased resolution of 4K compared to Blu-ray. But without those massive screens in the home, you really are reliant on HDR or Dolby Vision to see the difference that 4K can give. But whether or not this one is better than Le Mans 66, I think it is, but it is an exceptional transfer and does show what is possible from 35mm film if scanned or transferred properly. And I believe, as it says on the extras on here, it was transferred at 5.6K, thereby probably denoting that 35mm has greater resolution than most probably realise, because if this is the best 35mm transfer, it was transferred at more than 4K and then shrunk down to 4K, and that could be important. The next one I'm putting in the list is number 9. 2001 A Space Odyssey. Now this I got on eBay because it was the Italian release, has exactly the same 4K disc. I think it's got exactly the same Blu-ray disc, just with Italian writing on the Blu-rays. It's got the English on the 4K, and some people tell me this is the best 4K disc of the lot. Well, it's not here, and I think that's because large parts of the original negative had turned to dust or were too badly damaged to be used for this transfer. And unfortunately, this is the third 4K disc I've found that has developed a fault. I think it's laser rot, and it gets to a certain point of the disc and then just shuts off. And to get this out of the player last night, I had to unplug the player to give it a cold boot, restart it, and then press eject. It really had locked up that badly. So I'm not sure if it's just unlucky. This was an Italian release, so maybe they actually pressed discs in different parts of the world. This was done in a lesser lab and it's just faulty. But it is a bit concerning. I've got more than 100 4K discs, and so far I've found 3 of them that have developed this problem. So is there a problem with the format? Let me know what you think in the comments. I've put the 10 Commandments at number 8, but with the next few films it really is hard to tell, so either one could be number 5, 6, 7, 8, something like that. Over time I might be able to differentiate them better, but I've put the 10 Commandments at number 8 because there are green screen and matte shots in this where it's obvious they're green screen and matte shots. It's nothing to do with the 4K transfer, it was how it was made, and this was shot VistaVision and Technicolor, and I've explained that in some detail in my review of this film. It really is exceptional to look at in most places, but there are 1 or 2 dodgy effects, but we just have to accept that because VistaVision is a 35mm process where it's shot horizontally 8 sprockets across, and therefore you don't have a bigger format film to go to do the special effects, which then get hidden when they're shrunk down. So that's why they stand out a bit, but a great 4K disc and well worth picking up. Number 7, I've put My Fair Lady. Now, when this came out, quite a few people messaged me to say it's the best 4K disc they've seen, and it is exceptionally good. However, just like with 2001, large parts of the negative of this had turned to dust or had been damaged beyond use, and so they had to return to the next element in the line or a dupe negative. They may actually have gone to the 3 Technicolor elements that we use to make the Technicolor prints, and that appears to be what happened because you can sometimes see the blurring that process gives. So it's an exceptional 4K disc. I've done a full review of it, worth taking a look at. A 65mm shoot again, and that, like all these big format films, shrinks down to give better 35mm prints and also better 4K discs on our video discs. So another exceptional one and worth taking a look at. And number 6, it's another VistaVision really, but this is a Technicolor process. It's called Spartacus. Now Technicolor, I've detailed this in my review of this film, is a squeezed VistaVision. So horizontal 35mm, 8 sprockets across, but squeezed I think at 1.5 times. And therefore when that is optically unsqueezed, it fits perfectly onto a 70mm release print. So you get a 2.2 to 1 aspect ratio, and this really is another exceptional 4K disc. If I recall correctly, you will see the odd slightly blurry special effects shot where it was the same problem as with the 10 Commandments. They were already using a big format film, so nothing bigger to go to shoot the special effects, so they would shrink down and then be disguised. But Spartacus is another fabulous 4K disc, and if you haven't seen it, worth putting in your collection. Number 5 is a Christopher Nolan film. The next few will actually be Christopher Nolan films because he used genuine IMAX. Now, genuine IMAX is 70mm film that is 15 sprockets high, and although they're sadly no longer producing prints in the full IMAX format, they are doing, I believe, 8K shrink downs to IMAX. Should still look exceptionally good, but perhaps not up to the standard of the last one I saw, which was an extract from Dunkirk, where a Stuka dive bomber was coming in to bomb some troops out on the jetty, and it was so realistic I thought this Stuka was going to kill all of us in the cinema. But anyway, what I've put at number 5 is because it was one of his first, I think, where he included IMAX scenes. It's equally as good as The Dark Knight for those IMAX scenes, but there's very few of those in The Dark Knight. It is, of course, The Dark Knight Rises. Now, all three of the Dark Knight films look exceptionally good on 4K. They've got that distinctive 4K look, but this one has the most IMAX in it. So if you've got a big screen and a 4K video projector, this really does have to be seen to be believed, and that's the case with the next few films. So highly recommended, all three of the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight films, but this one is a standout exception and in my opinion is the most exciting of the three films. And judging by the comments to my full review on the Dark Knight trilogy, it would seem that most do agree with me. So cue loads of comments where we all argue about that all over again, but that's no bad thing. Next, I've put a number 4. What I consider to be his masterpiece, one of a couple of masterpieces perhaps, is Interstellar. Now, the review of this did very well, and there is a hell of a lot of IMAX in this. It makes for a great 4K disc. There are plenty of 35mm scenes in this, as there are in The Dark Knight Rises and the next couple that come along, and you can tell the degradation in the image quality, but this has to be accepted because to get dialogue sequences with IMAX is virtually impossible because the cameras tend to be massive and the noise they make is incredible. So there's no real way of doing sound unless you've got a very strong zoom lens, or you've got one heck of a bubble around the IMAX camera to try and muffle all that drumming. But Interstellar, I think, is a masterpiece. Seeing this at the BFI IMAX, as I said, was almost like a religious experience, much like a lot of people reported for seeing 2001: A Space Odyssey in a Cinerama theatre on that giant louvered curve screen, which they've still got in Bradford. So perhaps if they're screening that at the widescreen weekend in October, I'll see you there. Number 3. I've put Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk, and the reason this has gone in at number 3 is because there is so much genuine IMAX in this that it really does make for a stunning 4K disc. Again, we've got some 35mm for the dialogue sequences for the same reasons as Interstellar, but it really doesn't matter. You get so involved with the film that even when you're projecting it and the masking hasn't fully covered the image when it's gone down to 235, 24 to 1, it's not quite as impactful as that extract I saw at the BFI IMAX when I thought the Stuka dive bomber was going to kill us all, but it really is an exceptional 4K disc and really should be in everyone's collection. Number 2, it's another Christopher Nolan film, and I put this at number 2 simply because Tenet is just such a wonderful film. I don't think anyone can understand it on a first viewing. You've got to watch it, go through the extras, watch it again, and then you've got a pretty good idea of what's going on, but it is very difficult to comprehend. But I did a video on this one where I do explain it all, so there's a lot of spoilers in that, but I don't think it will spoil your enjoyment of the film. If anything, it should enhance it, because you will stand a chance of understanding what on earth is going on. But this has a lot of IMAX again. Yes, there's some 35mm for the same reasons as the others. Might actually be 70mm now I mention it. But the IMAX sequences, just breathtaking. And of course it shrinks down to 4K like all these large format films do, and gives us something really special to enjoy on our home systems. Couldn't recommend it enough. Love the film. Really want to see it at the BFI IMAX, even though apparently the IMAX prints aren't genuine IMAX anymore, and that was the first one they shrunk down to 8K and then did the IMAX print. But we'll see. I'm hoping to get to see it at the IMAX, and if I do, you can be sure I'll be reporting on here what I think of that. So for people who've been following my channel, no surprise, still number 1, Murder on the Orient Express. A few people have reported that they see too much film grain in this. I've been through it and through it and through it and can't spot any, but it will be there. It's just televisions in particular, because they're so much brighter, they do tend to pick up film grain and illustrate it more. Now, Death on the Nile, if you watch my video on that, I don't think I mentioned it, but I was sat quite close to the screen, because if you go to the Odeon Leicester Square, you've really got to sit in the first half half of the stalls, I think, really, to get the full impact of the big screen there. And Death on the Nile didn't look quite as good as I was expecting due to this 4K disc of Murder on the Orient Express, but I think the 4K of Death on the Nile is going to look exceptional when it arrives. Whether or not it's as good as this, I don't know. But what is really impressive about this, really, I think, is the opening scenes at the Wailing Wall, and look into the distance of the people. When the crowd scenes are fully in focus across the frame, you can pick out individual faces in the distance, and that really is quite rare. There's a bit of it in Tenet and the other large format films, but really, with the modern fine-grained film stock of these 65mm cameras, it really does produce something very special indeed. So number one is still Murder on the Orient Express, and recently, because of the release of Death on the Nile, HMV and the offshoot FOP have been doing a deal on the 4K of Murder on the Orient Express, and they're doing them in the slipcover again, and with any other purchase I got this in FOP for £10, and given what's been happening with a few of my 4K discs packing up, I thought I don't want it happening to that, so I'll leave this one in the shrink wrap, and if it does ever happen, at least I've got a second copy to see that reference disc of how good 4K can be. And yes, it's a great transfer, it's a great film, it's very well made, but it's all to do with how good the film is when it's first made. And if you're shooting 65mm, that shrinks down onto your 4K disc, and that gives you the best 4K disc of the lot. So that brings us to the end. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and perhaps consider subscribing, so I'll be encouraged to carry on making videos like this in the future. Until the next video, bye bye for now.